right, everyone. Welcome to Step Back Tonight. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday night show I do, where I hang out with y'alls, and we hang out, we learn to love. We learn to love cats. There's a cat. There's a Phoebe flooped out on the table right there. And we grow closer together as a community of weirdos. The Step Back weirdos. The Orc Gang. The Orb Gang. Whatever other demonym that I have foisted upon you without your consent. Hello! Let's take a look at the chat right now. I see there's a lot of discussion about how they can't take back what they just saw in the splash screen before the stream started, which I'm okay with. The GIF is part of a joke that comes out in a future video that will be funnier to you when you actually see it. Hello. So, what can we talk about? It's like been a million degrees. Actually, it cooled off a bit just today, but it's been a real jam. I am knee deep in the next video, working real hard on it. My optimistic hope is that it'll be out tomorrow. My pessimistic hope is that it'll be out on Thursday or Friday. I'm really not hoping it'll be out on Friday. I really hope that Thursday is the latest that it'll go. But yeah, it's going. It'll be fun. I'm premiering a new series, so you guys will enjoy that. Other than that, what else is going on in the world? I found out that Boris Johnson is going to be prime minister. That's terrifying. I think somebody asked what my thoughts were on Boris Johnson becoming the next PM, and I'm just like, oh, all right. I'm wondering who the first president of Scotland's going to be then. That's my first thought, is like, oh, Boris Johnson is prime minister. Yeah. Okay, Scotland's gone. But I've been talking about that for a while. I'm not super duper optimistic about Scotland. Oh. Yeah, sorry. I was just looking for a certain thing. Besides that, things have been pretty nice here. I've been busily working. I've been trying to do some cool stuff, and just keeping it real. Just keeping it real. I realize I can't read in these, so I have to. All right, that's better. I'm gonna have to make the text real big, so I can see this. Okay. No, that's not even gonna do it. Okay. This was a bad idea. But in the name of these sunglasses, I'm just gonna have to quote unquote deal with it. Am I related to Boris Johnson? I feel like I should be insulted in that.
Oh wait, those are actual sunglasses.
They are, but they're also not prescription, which means I am seeing a wall of blur right now.
I thought you did that on camera somehow.
Yeah, those are actual sunglasses. We got these at VidCon.
I did not.
All right. I think that the joke has run its course because I literally cannot read the computer screen in front of me with these on. So, I just have to go back. Plus, I can't read the chat. Much better. Okay. I don't know why. I am in a very goofy mood tonight. Okay. Cool. All right, what was the next question we got, y'all? The next question is, please update Google Chrome. No, thank you. Okay. What is the next non-goof question? You know how the Obama administration decided to just give the Bush administration a pass for their war crimes? Do you think the next Democratic administration will do that for Trump? Yes. Because I imagine that they are, depending upon who the next president is, but if it is somebody who's not, I guess the president can't really initiate that. Congress has to initiate that. So Nancy Pelosi probably won't push forward a investigation into crimes done by the Donald Trump administration. I guess the president can do that because the president has to pardon them. So I imagine maybe Sanders might, but none of the other ones will. They'll say we have to move forward and not look back. And Donald Trump will be rich, and Donald Trump will be comfortable and happy until the end of his days, while we struggle to pay bills, because this is the world we live in. Yeah, it's just that, like, the thing is, by conventional public wisdom, that the drawn-out procedures of things like that would do more damage to the Democrats' support than the Republican support, thinking that they're going on an unfair witch hunt against the government or against the former president. And honestly, when presidents get elected, they usually have a big list of things they want to do. And when they have that, they kind of don't want to be dragged down and fighting the fights of the previous administration. Oh boy. I closed the thing and I just saw a big thing in my face that I photoshopped out for that gag at the thing. So yeah, I do think that even Elizabeth Warren will probably pardon Donald Trump and his administration, unless they do something like extremely egregious, but I don't think it will. I don't think it'll go down that way. Trump's going to get away with it. I mean, I'm still like 50-50 that he's just going to be president for life, so, you know, there's that. Okay. Because he's already talking about getting like a third term, and he gets less and less joking the more he jokes about it. He's doing one of those things. Thoughts on Boris Johnson becoming the new prime minister? Oh boy. So Boris Johnson is a real bad dude. But I think that the big thing that it means is that, first of all, verbally assaulted his girlfriend not even a month ago and is now prime minister. That's a real class act there, United Kingdom. But on top of that, Boris Johnson is going to probably, like, Boris Johnson is the pro hard Brexit guy, which means all of the worst things in the UK are going to happen. All of the worst cases of Brexit are guaranteed to happen. So that hard Brexit that you Brits have been warned about for all these months, it's going to happen. You're going to get to a point where the UK that was like importing most of its food and like, you know, had a massive trade deficit is all of a sudden going to have ships just smash in at the border because there's going to be no free trade zone, which means that ships are now going to have to go through customs when they get to shore, which means they're going to be heavily backed up, which means all of the stuff that the UK likes having are all going to be backed up, which means that the prices on things are going to go way up. Grocery stores are going to be out of money. There's going to be complete turmoil and chaos. And on top of that, all of the places that want to get away from that in order to stay in the European Union is going to be, you're going to see Ulster, the northern county of Ireland. You're going to see Scotland. You're going to see Gibraltar all go in different directions so that we'll end up with a Europe in 2019 where England and Wales is just this obscure country that is one of the most economically depressed countries in the European Union. So there's that. Who knows? Maybe one day in the future when you guys get a Labour government, soon, hopefully, that someone will vote to join the European Union, and then a bunch of English people can go to Poland to get work. So you know, Cornish independence. Oh man, Wales. I don't know if Wales is ever gonna. I don't think Wales has any like. I don't think Wales has any like real strong movements towards independence. As far as I know. All right. Would you ever throw your cat if it set you off while if it set on you while gaming? No, you can't. First of all, I don't play any games that would require that much of a Twitch response. But on top of that, why would I? Why would I not pet a kitty that was on my lap? Are you gonna still do an interview with Ken Feder about ancient astronauts, or did I miss it? Well, Luke, the question on that is, unfortunately, I was actually going to interview Ken Feder for the Ancient Aliens video, but he broke his leg. And he wasn't going to be in shape that he could do the interview before the video came out. And now it's kind of redundant. So maybe if I do another like pseudo-archaeology video in the future, he liked the Ancient Aliens video. I linked it to him, and he really liked it. So there's that. He did look at the script, and he approved the script, so that's nice. But yeah, unfortunately, he had a broken leg, and so he couldn't do an interview. He really just couldn't be by a computer. Wolframium, Tristan, have you seen the subreddit Toilet Paper USA? It's great and hilarious. I feel like I have seen Toilet Paper USA. It's just like parodies of TP USA ads, right? All right. I said to my dad, you know the pre-Roman Britons probably had a gift economy rather than a barter setup. He said, how is exchanging similarly valued gifts not barter? Response to that. I mean, a gift economy is not so much trading reasonably sized, like reasonably valued gifts as much as it is like, hey, like, I'll get you, like, I have, like, a sheep, and I know that you make boots, so I know that, like, you know, every, like, season when I go to slaughter the sheep, that I'll give you one, and then I know that you'll have sheep, and that's it, and then the shoe guy will be like, hey, I make so many shoes a year, I'm going to save a couple pairs for the person who gets me a sheep, but it's like not going to happen transactionally. It's very much like based on relationships. It's like when you have friends that, you know, all right, yeah, like, you know, I'm a little short, can you get me like this, can you pay for this coffee? Yeah, sure, I'll get you, and then you can get me next time, that kind of a thing. Tristan, are you high on indica or sativa? I am high on neither. This is actually what I'm like when I get a proper amount of sleep. Typically, by the time Tuesday at 7 p.m. comes around, I'm like half asleep because of working all day and my chronic insomnia. So typically I'm like a complete wreck at 7 o'clock. But I had a very satisfying pre-show snooze that gives me a little bit more energy, and I'm also kind of in a fey mood from from working on a video, from editing the next video I'm putting out. It makes me feel I'm being extremely goofy in that video, and so I'm kind of just in a good mood from that. Not that I'm against weed. I mean, I have weed in my apartment. It's perfectly legal and it's perfectly wonderful. Just, it's not a thing that I am currently using right now. What do you think about Marianne Williamson? I kind of liked her despite having no chance until she said Medicare for all is anarchy. Yeah, her healthcare stance is bad. The only things that... Okay, so Marianne Williamson, I don't actually mind her, like, politics of love idea. I actually think it's rather sweet. It's just kind of, like, not a thing that you'd expect your president to have. But at the same time, like, she's very much, like, a liberal. She's a neoliberal, like, she's pro-capitalism at its core. But she has, I think, what came out of the debates, or the debate that happened a few weeks ago, is that she's a lot more woke when it comes to foreign policy stuff than I think we acknowledged, than we knew before. And then she recently went on the Joe Rogan podcast and fucking wrecked him. Or was it Joe? No, it was Dave Rubin. I get those mixed up. She went on Dave Rubin and like just destroyed his ass with orbs and logic. And I thought that was great. It makes me think that I like her. I think she's actually a pretty cool personality. She's a little funky, but you know what? I've had weirder friends. I've had various when you're a leftist and an academic, you end up with friends who are various levels of granola and crunchy, to the point where, okay, I had like one friend who was a bit of an anti-vaxxer, but like that's like the most. She was like the most weirdo friend I've ever had. But I've had like friends who are like, you know, various levels of weird kind of spirituality, and that's fine. You know, whatever works for them. So, you know, I think Marianne Williamson's fine. Let's say on like the scope of Democratic candidates, you could do a lot worse than Marianne Williamson. What I also really like about her is that there was this whole thing with Andrew Yang trying to set himself up as the meme candidate, despite him actually being rather boring. And then he tried to set himself up as the meme candidate. And then he actually got to the debates and he was like, womp, womp. But then Marianne Williamson showed that the best meme candidates are the ones who make themselves organically, rather than like people who, you know, come in and say, hey, are you tired of having disability benefits? Here, have this $1,000 a month that your landlord will immediately raise your rent to take away from you. Like, yeah, whatever. And also Andrew Yang's like fan base are like made up of a whole huge amount of neo-Nazis, which like I don't really like that much. Like, ugh. Okay. Why aren't conservatives bothered by the fact that experts consistently tell them their views are objectively wrong? Like, if you think retributive justice is effective, the data just says you're wrong. Yeah, well, I did a Twitter thread about this a few months ago, and I felt very weird about it. But yeah, almost all, like, liberal and conservative political positions are done entirely in the face of data. Like, the idea, like, every single statement they have is based on ideology. It's not based on data and facts. If you were to follow facts and data and things like that, you'd be a socialist. But if you look at, like, the immortal science of Marxism-Leninism, no, we won't get there. We won't go there. But, like, if you look at the entire philosophy behind neoliberalism, that if you remove the barriers towards investment and you lower taxes for the wealthiest, that they will reinvest that money rather than sit on it, shows to not work. And it shows that, like, and things like the stock market are not are like no better than gambling and like things like that. So it's like, to be honest, it's just such a goof. But it's because of, I don't think that they particularly are bothered by the fact that nothing that they do is based on evidence, because it's not a logical, reasoned position. It's based on ideology and theory. So if it doesn't work, they're kind of like President Skinner. They're like, could it be that my ideology of capitalism, this system justifying belief that makes me think that I'm superior to others, is wrong? No, it is the people that are wrong. And so very often they can reason themselves into a position of thinking, oh, it's not that conservative things are wrong. It's just that we haven't done enough stuff. We haven't done enough capitalism yet. And so their ideology needs it to succeed. Yeah. That's it. It's ideology. The capitalism and liberal thinking is what's called and Kelly's going to groan at this, in social psychology circles, a system justifying belief. It's not an ideology born of observation or facts or logic. It's born of seeing the world as an unequal distribution of resources, seeing yourself on top of that uneven thing, and instead of reasoning that maybe you have an unfair advantage, coming to the conclusion that no, because of all these things I just made up, it's actually okay. This is why, like, every economics textbook, chapter 1 is like, Chapter 1, the profit motive. If Billy wants a hamburger and he has $2, then he can go to the burger store and pay $2 for a burger. We call that the profit motive. This encourages people to make things better and increase competition. And then chapter 9 is like, now this is why people starving in the streets is okay, actually. That's my theory of economics, where it's just, they always want to take you to like Econ 101 to describe things, and then they never get to the fact that, like, oh, according to this textbook, it's like okay to just let people starve to death because that's what the invisible hand wants. If they're not efficient, then they can just die. Oh, yeah, I don't think I want to add more to that, do I? I've dug myself deep enough. I'm not a terrible capitalist. I am a hero. Okay. Hey Tristan, I really enjoyed Mexi's video on radical creativity and was curious whether you had something to add. Well, Andreas, trying to remember, that one came out a while ago, wasn't it? Mexi's video on radical creativity. I do think, and I think Noam Chomsky said this too, that right now in the left, in the online, and like, well, not online left, in the left in general, I guess in the intellectual left is the term to say, the theorists and stuff like that, there is this distinct idea that, like, what we're still stuck in the mentality of like 100 years ago. You know, it's 2019 and we're still debating on reform versus revolution, and the concept of revolution is still like the 1917 revolution again. And our idea of reform is like still social democracy, and that's it. And so one of the things I guess I would want to say to that is we need, the left needs a lot more imagination. We need new ideas because it's an underfunded, undersupported area of political science. So there's not that many people in the field doing the hard theory work, but we definitely need leftist theory for a new age, because we're still thinking like it's 100 years ago, and we are well past that. That's why, like, when I say that there's like, when I see leftists who really think that they can hoard guns and that somehow we're going to defeat, you know, the soldiers with like the assault rifles and the armored personnel carriers and the fighter jets and the predator drones, that somehow we're gonna get around all that and take over the government, and it's gonna be just like 1917, except this time we're gonna do it right. We're gonna do it right this time. We made mistakes last time, and this time we won't. It'll happen. And then when the revolution comes and saves all of us, in all caps with a trademark sign, and we finally get to make all the changes that we want because we've murdered everybody who disagrees with us, then Somehow that is a thing that, one, we can do, and two, that won't just make an entire generation of people who hate us because we've killed people close to them. So, on that note, I am also not much of a reformist, because reformists, democratic socialists and social democrats are very much like the if we just sit on our hands and we ask permission from power politely to do something, then eventually they'll say yes. The system works, even though it has demonstrated over and over again to go from. It doesn't work. So I think both options suck, and we need a new one. And I am not smart enough to think of that up. My closest thing I've ever come to thinking about how do we change to a better world that doesn't involve LARPing the 1917 revolution, or by asking the state pretty please for permission to please dismantle capitalism for us, is trying to coordinate with creating almost like an internet version of CyberSyn, where we can manage a shadow economy based on our own, desires, based on our own abilities and needs, where we would set up informal trading networks and informal logistics networks for moving goods and services to and from people. And that we can kind of make that as a challenge to the state. And hopefully, my guess is that it would work better. And at some point, one would replace the other. What that would look like at that point, I don't know. But that's the very little, that's the very small part. It's kind of based on anarcho-syndicalism, the kind of building the new world within the old or type thing. But that's kind of where I'm at. But as far as Mexi's video goes, it's good. You should watch it. And I do think that the left is suffering from a dearth of imagination. Help, help, I'm being oppressed. I think somebody was mentioning this. We are an anarcho-syndicalist commune. Well, I'm your king. I didn't vote for you. This is just my one-man show now where I do a bunch of dumb voices. It's because tomorrow I have to be a dungeon master, so I'm preparing all of my NPC voices. Well, I didn't vote for you. Okay. I gotta stop. I'm being such a goof. This is not what you guys are here for. You guys are here for extremely serious real-life lore analysis, in which we seriously analyze the YouTube channel Real Life Lore. No. We have to figure out what's going on with the world. You need me for some reason to have opinions about things that happen. So must not poke too much into this, or else the entire house of cards that holds up my career falls apart. Is it advisable to leave the UK with Brexit on the horizon? If you still got that freedom of movement from being a European Union citizen, I would do it. If I was living in England right now, I'd be taking a real hard look of moving to Ireland, or, failing that, Edinburgh. What else? Why do you keep talking about English people suffering because of Brexit like it's funny? 'Cause it's sad, and it's kind of a compensation method. I mean, England has really done a number on the planet over the last few centuries, and I mean, I hate to laugh, but this is a completely self-inflicted wound. I feel bad for people who voted Remain and are now stuck with it. But but it's weird to see. This is very fine. Fine. I will change it up. I will get rid of all emotional compensation methods. This is very sad. It is bad. It is dreary. To be serious, Brexit is going to suck, and for English people, it's going to be brutal. If you are an English person, you should try fixing that as soon as possible. Yeah. That's about, like, I don't know. I'm a fucking goofball on the internet. I'm just a goofball on the internet over here. Okay. Okay, that one wasn't good.
I, for one, am into this. How do we get you to do this every week?
She asked me how do I do this every week. Monarcho-anarchism. Oh, goodness. All right. What if we live in a world where no one pays bills for electricity, water, sewage, utilities, rent, and food? Wouldn't you want to live in that world? Hell yeah, I'd want to live in that world. I also would like to put work on that one, where you wouldn't have to work, and we have that fully automated luxury gay space communism. So that's my, you know me. That's my jam. Okay, George Bingham wants to know, what do you think about Labour anti-Semitism allegations? Oh my, we're talking a lot about the UK today. I don't know. I think I've said this on a couple of occasions in streams that I don't know if there's anything more to this than, like, the Labour Party criticizes Israel and the right in the UK, like in the rest of the West, are taking a really bad faith interpretation of it. Because, like, if it's the same, if people are calling the Labour Party, like, anti-Semitic because of the exact same reason that, like, people call Ilhan Omar anti-Semitic, then, like, that's going to be, that is, like, the epitome of some bullshit right there. But I don't know if that's, you know, the case. And I don't want to have a strong opinion unless something happens, unless you know, lest I find out something that I didn't know beforehand, because I'm not British, so I don't follow this very closely. Or no, doesn't Boris Johnson, I haven't heard, the last time I heard Boris Johnson speak was when he was getting interviewed on Freakonomics. And I seem to recall he's got a very bad voice. He's got a very weird British accent. Because he was born in New York City, you know. And he has a large collection of Winston Churchill's bullshit. And he wrote an entire book about him. I don't imagine that's what Boris Johnson sounds like. That's just what I'm imagining he sounds like. I imagine he also has a bulldog and a little, like, bowler hat and a monocle. So, you know how good and then he just wears, like, a straw wig when he goes out in public. Oh, wait, I went from him thinking that he had a bulldog to he is a bulldog, which I think I actually understand a lot better. And yes, I do agree, Churchill was a monster. What was the most embarrassing typo you have ever made? It was probably that tweet that I made a little while back where I said something around like, if you criticize Nazis, you're banned from the platform, but being a Nazi lets you stay on the platform, or something like that in a tweet. But then I got being replaced with banging, and so I said, you know, if you criticize Nazis, you get kicked off the platform, but if you bang a Nazi, they let you stay on, or something like that. It had some sort of gag. Either way. That's the most embarrassing. That's the only typo of note that I can remember right now. Um, plus, I did the I'm baby tweet. Or I did the I'm baby text. That was me, guys. The whole meme about I'm baby, that was me. I'm baby, call the police. It's true. I was the one who did it. It's not true. Should I watch that Dave Rubin interview with Marianne Williamson? If you want to, I'm sure it's fun. I don't know. I can't sit through like an hour and a half of bullshit like Dave Rubin-y type things. I don't know. I just can't handle. Guys, I can't handle. This is why I would not be good if I ran a channel like Kevin Logan or Three Arrows or Sean. Is that I can't just like go be like, all right, I'm gonna go watch all of Lauren Southern's videos. Like my emotional constitution could not handle watching an entire Sargon of Akkad video. I am made ill by his voice. So I really can't do that thing. What was the last theme park you've been to? I went to Disneyland last week. Or was that last week? 2 weeks ago.
You didn't really go to Disneyland.
I went to Downtown Disney, it counts. So it was Disneyland 2 weeks ago for Mexican food. If that doesn't count, it's been like years and years and years, and it was probably Canada's Wonderland. What do you think about Woody Allen now that the Epstein stuff happened? Should we separate art from the artist? I mean, you could, but I never really liked Woody Allen's stuff that much anyway, so can't really say much to that. I think that you can, to some degree, separate the art from the artist. I find that I think that it's a thing you can do, but I've often found that when I try to do said activity, I just can't do it. Like, I can't listen to Michael Jackson anymore. Like, I cannot hear a Michael Jackson song without thinking of all of the kids he's abused. And so I just can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. Maybe it's easier when it's like, Harvey Weinstein who frickin' funded like half of the movies that came out in the 2000s. And at some point, I think there was a great Matt Bohr's comic about this where like if you're going to be like regimented about not consuming content made by people who've done shitty things, you don't have that much culture to consume, because there's one common thing that makes all this content, which is shitty people or rich people. But I repeat myself, rich people who tend to be shitty because when nobody can tell you no, you end up becoming more and more of a power-hungry monster, and you end up doing terrible things to people. So, if you know that an artist is particularly shitty, try not to consume content made by, or try not to pay for said content that you consume made by them. So, like, I would never go to Indigo Books and buy a Robert Heinlein novel, because I don't want to give, I guess Robert Heinlein's dead, but I don't want to give the relatives of Robert Heinlein money. I would never buy a copy of Atlas Shrugged. I would, if I had to read Atlas Shrugged, I'd get it from the used bookstore, because then at least a used bookstore is getting money, not her estate or whatever the hell. Whoever's getting the Ayn Rand money. Please ooh-woo live. How does one ooh-woo? Do I just go ooh-woo? Is that an ooh-woo? Did I ooh-woo? I don't know. I'm not very good at the anime things. I haven't animated in a very long time. Okay. Purge the trolls, please. Are there trolls? If you have looked at Andrew Yang's UBI policy, what do you think of it? Okay, so let's talk about Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang has his cornerstone policy is what he calls the freedom dividend. It is a $1,000 a month check given to everyone. It is universal basic income of sorts. What it is, though, is it's very much the conservative idea of a universal basic income, which is that you give everybody $1,000 a month in return for opting out of social services. Because a lot of the conservative idea about UBI is that you use UBI to no longer pay for things like welfare and for disability benefits and things like that. Which, in a society like the United States, in one that's like Andrew Yang's America, because Andrew Yang is not for Medicare for all. Andrew Yang's like UBI system still would not be good for people who are like, you know, sick. Like, so the thing about UBI is that there would be like no cover, like even with the ability to like, you know, leave your job and go to another one, because of how expensive medicine and Medicare is in the US, you still wouldn't be able to leave your job because of medical benefits. And if you don't have medical benefits, if you got sick, your UBI is not going to take care of you. On top of that, America is a country that has like predatory payday lenders and has like landlords that are out of control that, like, in my mind, you would be like, I would be very surprised if what didn't happen after the freedom dividend becomes a project, that prices go up and things like your landlord decides to all of a sudden raise your rent by like $300 or $400 a month. And I think that very soon after the freedom dividend becomes a thing, that for the most part, people are going to like, it'll be just like now, you just won't have it. The market will adjust. Yang is actually for Medicare for all. Then how come when he was at the debate and he was told to raise his hand about getting rid of private insurance, he did not do it? Plus, like, my skin crawls when he says he wants everyone to be entrepreneurs. It's the most gross bullshit Silicon Valley thing I've ever heard. See, the thing is, universal basic income can't be done that simple. It can't just be like one set number a month. It has to factor in living expenses. It has to factor in rent. It has to factor in, like, it has to be put on top of a strong, robust program of social housing, of a functioning medical system, of all of these things, or else, yeah, you're just gonna like lose your $1,000 a month with the various minor indignities that take away all of your freedom. Not to mention, with the whole like thing about inflation. Like, if you don't set it onto some sort of algorithm, then like your money is going to be worth less and less every single year. And if you want to raise it, can you imagine when if UBI becomes a thing, and like then you realize that over time your UBI becomes worth less and less every single year, and eventually like you get to a point where you have to raise the UBI. And can you imagine how much of a politically how like conservatives will go bananas every time you want to raise the UBI? You'd be like, oh, you just want people who can't afford, who are too lazy to work to get money, and it'll be like the same. It'll be like freaking welfare all over again. No. Put on the same system as Social Security. Huh. Okay, sorry, my throat's getting a little sore. I talk too loud when I do these things. I should really not yell. What do you think the military would do if people actually stormed Area 51? Firing on a horde of conspiracy theorists might be bad PR. I think that if they actually did, like if they actually did the storm Area 51 thing, that they'd probably know ahead of time and prepare for mass arrests and kick them out. I imagine that they'd have some sort of non-lethal way to handle them. Are you a vegetarian? Why or why not? I have tried. I was a vegetarian for about a year, a few years ago, and then I've tried to go vegan on a couple of occasions, but it never lasted very long. For the most part, if I was like my idealized self, I'd probably be vegan. But I am a weakling. I'm a weak man who gives in to temptation. And to be honest, like personal choices like that are not what's going to upend factory farming and unsustainable agriculture. So I'm not really contributing all that much to the change in the world. But still, it's still a thing that I would rather not be associated with if I could avoid it. But I'm only human. I'm sure that one day I will be, when it's a little bit easier to do. Okay. Is democracy a failure? Is choosing legislators and policymakers based on popularity ineffective and is not equipped to deal with the problem of capitalism and climate change? I would argue that that's what you just... It's like the sentence you said is kind of like saying, are apples a failure? Because if you look at oranges, then you can see that oranges are completely ineffective. In my mind, the idea of representative democracy and legislatures are not democratic. Just because you can choose your oppressor does not make you not oppressed. In my mind, democracy is a great thing. It'd be nice if we ever had it. Democracy is when you don't have anybody who rules over you. The people rule things. There's no leaders. There's no politicians. It's done by community consensus building and collective decision making. I don't think representative democracy is actually a form of democracy. It is a fig leaf to tell you that you are being represented and that you have a say, but you really don't. I think, like, was it Karl Marx who said that, like, you get to choose once every 4 years what member of the capitalist class gets to oppress you. So in my mind, this is a very anarchist thing to say, but I think that we would need to just, like, states and democracy are incompatible organizations. All right. That being said, I do think representative democracy has been a failure, yes. I think that autocrats of all kinds have been ineffective at dealing with problems of capitalism and climate change because you only select from the people who benefit from it. Why don't the Russian people have higher levels of material wealth since the fall of the Soviet Union if capitalism is so great? Well, Gledge42, thank you for setting up those bowling pins for me. The Soviet Union collapse has resulted in a massive decline in human... Oh my god. Wait. Just 1 second. I'll get back to this question in a second. Cory Booker blasts Donald Trump as a quote-unquote physically weak specimen. And then here's another Cory Booker quote from the same story. My testosterone sometimes makes me want to punch him.
What? He didn't say that.
It's, what's it called? Oh my, like, this is real. What? He said it on Late Night with Seth Meyers. Cory Booker? I just put that in the chat. Holy moly, that just popped up. Sorry. That... Wait, what? Oh, Cory Booker. My perfectly smooth presidential candidate. My featureless clay presidential candidate. Holy moly, that's something. That's something. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so the Soviet Union, like, the fall of the Soviet Union led to a massive decrease in the material wealth of the average citizen of a former Soviet state. And, yeah, the whole shock doctrine thing, as Tsar Peppers kind of said, the whole fact that, like, capitalists moved in the collapse of the Soviet Union to put in, like, these neoliberal tendencies and created the most capitalist thing. And now, like, there's a lot of Soviet nostalgia in the former Soviet Union. And also, you know, fascism's coming back because now they're like, I didn't like communism or capitalism. Guess it's time to fascist. Yeah, I think there was like a great line where it was like, there's this great line where it showed this like young woman, this young Russian woman, and just said, during the Soviet Union, this poor woman, oppressed by the system, would be forced to become an engineer. Now, she's free. She's a free person in Russia. She gets to choose whether to be homeless or a prostitute. And it was like, yeah, it sounds about right. It's very sad. But fascism is capitalism, but even worse. This is true. I argue against an Andrew Yang supporter who is an anarcho-pacifist who said, "Anpasses are further left than Ancoms because they reject the very tenet of fascism." What do you make of that? This person is a very unique person. An Andrew Yang supporter who's an anarcho-pacifist? That's a unique combination of human. So, are anarcho-pacifists further left than anarcho-communists because they reject the very tenet of fascism? So I'm not going to say he's wrong on that, but also the idea of something being further left makes little sense in that context. It's very much like both are, like when it comes to left versus right is about whether or not you believe in the equal distribution of resources. There's like an anarcho-pacifist who believes in non-violence as a method to... Like, anarcho-pacifists trace their origin to the anti-nuclear movement in the socialist world. Which, like, I totally get because I haven't done a lot of videos about this, but, like, I think a lot about nuclear weapons, and I am very anxious about them at all times. And I think that can't you be an anarcho-pacifist and an anarcho-communist? Yes. They are not mutually exclusive categories. This is true. But also, like, yeah, I don't think the quote-unquote revolution, TM, the revolution, trademark, is going to happen all at once at the same time with the same intensity. And I do think that anarcho-pacifists have a role to play because I do think that if you have the revolution, if people think that they can LARP 1917 in a world where there are nuclear weapons, I have some bitter pills for you to swallow. Okay. Was the Chinese Empire able to survive in the 1900s where all other empires that existed in the late Iron Age disappeared for centuries, even millennia ago? I mean, that depends upon what you mean by the Chinese Empire. Like, yeah, there was an emperor of China in the 1900s, but to say that, like, China had been, like, one contiguous state from the Iron Age all the way to the present is a little misleading. Because, like, China, like, even the way that they teach Chinese history, China goes through different dynasties, and a lot of the times the end of those dynasties and the beginning of new dynasties are, like, pockmarked with, like, periods of breakup, disunity, and then generations sometimes of, you know, disunity before another dynasty is able to be put in place. And so very often, like, just because the way that the Chinese tell Chinese history, they tell it as if China is this this one contiguous state, which, you know, since there's only one China today, you can imagine that there might be some interest in telling such a story. But honestly, China has broken up and reformed several times over the last few thousand years. Are the Catalonian politicians in prison political prisoners? Yes. I'm pretty sure. Where does our capitalist economics major voice come from? Where does your capitalist economics major come from? I don't exactly know where. I think it comes from. There's a Bo Burnham music video, or a Bo Burnham song, where he's just like creating, like, laughing at people's misfortunes isn't a dark and horrible thing to do. It's being a hero. And, like, I kind of just, like, took that sound and turned it into a voice. I don't know. I do a lot of weird voices. I feel like if I was able to live another life, I'd try to become like a person who runs the Muppets or something. A Muppet puppeteer. Oh, hey, my mom's in the chat. The song is called Sad. That's true. Also, Kelly's taking care of the questions tonight. Want to thank her for that. It is so hard for me to follow these things, and if you remember before, I was getting very distracted and lost. Are you still planning on doing a video about the Satanic Panic? Well, Luke Lee, you are in luck, because I have already recorded it. Or most of it, I should say. I have some more things I need to record. Not much, though. But yes, it is finished. It is there. It is in production. It will be out, I hope, sometime in August. Depending upon what my schedule looks like. I have to do one more interview next week, and then film a couple things, and then I'm pretty much done. And I just gotta edit it all together, where it's going to be like one of the most complicated editing jobs I've ever done. So it'll be a while. It's on a slow burn. Okay. What's the history of crucifixion as a form of capital punishment? Mostly when and why did it stop? I think you've asked me this question before, and I said I didn't really know where crucifixion came from. I imagine that the widespread adoption of Christianity is probably what killed crucifixion. Because now, instead of crucifying prisoners, they just crucify themselves, like those people. I'm trying to remember where that country is. There's these people who every Easter crucify themselves. It's really weird. When society inevitably crumbles due to climate change, money loses its value. Wouldn't the state lose its power? Wouldn't all weapons hoarding pay off? Sure. So, like, if we get, like, our, you know, climate change apocalypse, then won't hoarding weapons pay off? Sure. Yes. I don't want to put all my stakes in that outcome. And on top of that, I don't think that catastrophic level of climate change is likely in my lifetime. Like, in my mind, if we have a massive collapse of civilization, it's probably going to be later in the century, which will probably be after I am dead. So I'm not, I mean, yeah. Have you ever heard of monarcho-communism? If not, just remember it has all the communism and all the fancy outfits. Oh, geez. I know this is unpopular, but aren't Christianity and Islam just sects of Judaism that got bigger due to proselytizing, i.e. forbidden in Judaism? I don't know. I feel like so Christianity, you could make that argument, and I think that early Christians did make that argument. There's a couple things you can say to that, which is that Judaism, by most definitions, for a long time, like, Judaism is not just a set of scriptures and beliefs. That's actually a rather Christian way to think about it. Judaism, until recently, I think they've made some reforms on this. It's not really something you can, like, convert to. It's not something you can become a Jew. Judaism very much is as much an ethnicity and a bloodline as it is a religion. But even then, I do think that early Christians did consider themselves a new sect of Judaism when they were first starting out. But then they've kind of, superseded them all. Islam, I would say, less could argue with that. I think Islam tends to say it has higher ties with Ibrahim, or King Abraham. Ibrahim is, like, a very important figure in Islam. But, like, Islam doesn't, like the Quran is not a New Testament like the Bible is. The Quran is a one and singular book that has stories from the Bible and from the Torah in it, but it's its own thing and has its own, like, changes all the way through. And so I would think that Islam has a much higher chance of not really being a sect of Judaism, but Christianity, I think you could certainly make the argument, although very heavily edited. It's a total conversion mod, if you will, for all you people who play Paradox games, which I know was like most of you. Just curious, this is from Samantha Rostova. Just curious, have you ever done a history of the European Union? I have not. I don't know why I decided that you were Russian just because your last name is Rostova. I'm sorry, Samantha. I apologize for my brazen accent attribution. Should the British take to the streets if the majority of them hate the idea of Boris Johnson as PM? Yes. The fact that now the UK has gone through 2 prime ministers with both Theresa May, although Theresa May had an election, she won, but Theresa May was chosen without the input of the people, and Boris Johnson was now chosen without the input of the people, that I think that if the UK is going to do Brexit, that to legitimize the government, the people of the UK should at least have an election. Like, do you think that, like, Prime Minister Johnson, terrifying concept, that Prime Minister Johnson is going to negotiate possibly one of the most large impact, and in my opinion, the largest disaster in British history since, like, since what's his name, doing the peace in our time thing with Hitler. So this is like one of the largest disasters in British history. To have that navigated by an unelected prime minister, in my mind, is terrible, and I feel like is a insult to democracy, and that the British definitely should at least demand an election, because I think with Boris Johnson as PM now, that next election, this is the reason why the Conservatives won't do it, is that if there's another election, Jeremy Corbyn will be Prime Minister. And they don't want that. No one is as bad as my country. Israel is the worst. That was the worst Hebrew accent I've ever done. And I have not done any. So I guess it's probably my best Hebrew accent, too. Who's more economically progressive, Joe Biden or Richard Nixon? Oh, Richard Nixon, for sure. For sure. Richard Nixon was considering doing UBI at one point. Should the bourgeoisie be crucified so that we could walk from New York to Orlando following the crosses? Ooh, that sounds horrifying. I do not want to see that. I do not want that to happen. It's not a good way to go. I don't want to do that. That sounds bad. No. Ugh. I don't like fantasizing about murdering people. What advice do you give mentally ill people struggling with loneliness when meds haven't worked? Well, Leonardo, I can't give you any advice on that. I do not know. My mental illness is a learning disability, which is nothing close to struggling with loneliness or whatnot, with like social anxiety or depression or whatever is causing your loneliness. I would say don't trust the advice of random guys on the internet and to seek help from a trained professional. And if you can't afford one of those, support line or, the people in your life that you do have around. 'Cause yeah, that shit's tough. And I don't think I could give you the right advice. I feel sorry for people who voted for Remain. So people who voted Leave deserve to suffer a little bit. They made their bed. The problem that Remain voters should be is that they made your bed too. Just because they didn't like the fact that brown people live in the UK now. Ina asks Tristan, could you ever guess why alt history is always like, what if the Nazis won? I said this before too. I'm kind of ticked off that alternate history is always so in my mind I think that a lot of there's a lot of alternate history people who seem to just be working out their political fantasies. A lot of alternate histories are written by racists and fascists fantasizing about what would happen if the Confederacy won the Civil War and what if the Nazis won World War II, which is so silly. I'm trying to think of an alternate history story that I actually liked. There is Fatherland, which I've talked about a little bit on this stream. Fatherland is an alternate history story that is a what if the Nazis won, but it's not that's a setting. In my mind, here's this is me, and that is I think that alternate history is good as a setting, but if you make it the plot, I think that when you make crossover and make the setting the plot, that the story suffers quite a bit. It's called the turtle dove syndrome. No. And so I don't the people who just do alternate history scenarios and write them out as blogs, as Wikipedia pages and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't think that's. I don't know. I don't know what the creative exercise is. I'm not gonna knock people's creative interests, but I do think that sometimes it's people working out their emotional things. I would love to see more positive alternate histories, aspirational alternate histories, but we don't get to do that. I I think just because they want something dramatic, we tend to go with the darker ones. Samantha Rostova. Tristan, when you gonna watch Gundam? I have watched a Gundam. I watched some Gundams when I was a kid. I watched Gundam Wing. I don't think I finished it. I think I tried rewatching it a few years ago, and I couldn't keep it up. I probably should. I remember liking Gundam Wing. I remember really, really liking Gundam Wing. And I should have at least watched it through to the end. But I always just, I can't, anime with, the subtitles and stuff like that, I can only do for so long. Did you go to Galaxy's Edge? No. Who is your favorite chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany? Which one was that? Is that West Germany? I don't know. I couldn't even name one, so there you go. Even the Jackson 5. No, I think the Jackson 5 I can kind of listen to. I don't know, I haven't listened to the Jackson 5 since all the whole thing. Does Indigo Books have anything to do with Indigo Children? No, Nathan. Indigo Books is just is like a Canadian version of Barnes & Noble. Kieran Scott. Okay, the only thing about Indigo I would say about Indigo Children is that it probably sold the Indigo Children book at some point. Kieran Scott, what do you think of Bullshit Job suggested by David Graeber? I haven't read the book, but the things that I have heard about the book are good. And I think that the idea seems solid. I just haven't read it, so I don't know for sure. Do you think Karl Marx meant commercial property when he wrote private property? I'm not really much of a Marxist philosopher, but rings right to me, but I haven't read Das Kapital or anything like that. I read the only Marxist theory that I have read is what's it called? David Beard's summary. He has a book that summarizes Capital. But David Graeber is pretty good. He follows me on Twitter and sometimes likes my tweets. So I feel like I have to be on my best behavior when I'm tweeting. Kieran Scott, do you think that a lot of classic sci-fi has leftist leanings? To an extent. A lot of classic sci-fi can be utopian, and in my mind, when people imagine a utopian or a better future, they almost always imagine it as a socialist one, which, says a lot about the world. So that's a leftist leaning right there. Does Canada have a big issue with homeowners association? In Florida, people are losing their homes to simple code violations and daily fines. I don't own a home, so I don't know. My parents own a home, and I don't remember there being a homeowners association, so maybe it's not an issue. Oh boy. Next one is, should incest be legal? I mean, having children, it's definitely risky for having children. And there is definitely a strong social taboo against it that would be a little bit grody. So, should it be illegal? Oh boy. That's a question and a half. I'm going to go with yes under our current system because of the child thing and move along because that is not a good question. I mean, it's a fine question. It's just one that I am not equipped to answer. Sirloin of Ice. Did you know about Cory Booker's brother? Yes. Yes. It is amazing. So Cory Booker's brother is named Cary Booker, Cary Booker, and looks almost exactly like Cory Booker. It's so weird. Cory Booker's brother, Cory Booker. I don't know how the Booker parents had two identical children and decided to give them almost the same name. This sounds like something that would happen if I let, like, Kelly name our children. Okay. It's so weird. Cory Booker, like, on paper, he looked like he was one of those people who was, like, made in a lab to be the perfect candidate to run for president. And now I know it's true because they made a backup. So I think Cory Booker might be some sort of lab experiment to create a president. Because he has all of the president things. He's a Rhodes Scholar, I think. He wrote a book. He's perfectly smooth. Like there's not a feature on him. Not a blemish, not a hair. Just perfectly smooth clay man. Okay. Where was I? We were talking about Cory Booker and his weird look. His uncanny valley. He is the Cat's trailer of presidential candidates. Where he's just strange to look at. Okay. Do you think that anarchist way of living isn't originally how humans organize themselves? Yes. I think for the majority of human life, we didn't really, like, until the advent of agriculture, we didn't really have, like, strict social castes and hierarchies. We kind of just lived in egalitarian, like, family groups doing subsistence foraging and actually had a lot more free time. And then we got farming, and farming started making everything all weird. Do I think that we would live in weird family pods and forage for a living? That's like the anarcho-primitivist argument. But I would say no. But I do think that it would be closer to how that would work. That we wouldn't have rulers and ruling classes and things like that. Wouldn't a technocracy with science, with policy based on the scientific method, be better than democracy, actually testing and finding ways to do the most good for the most people? See, the thing is, that's stuff that people have said in the past. And unfortunately, it never works out because no one can ever come to an agreement as to what good for the most people should mean. Like, look at all the, like, there's a lot of people who basically want a technocracy in America. I know because they all write for Vox. Like Ezra Klein, where, like, you know, they're like, his thought that we should have the scientific method based things. It's like, all right, the scientific method should drive all policy. So capitalism is good, and healthcare is too complicated to make public. So therefore, like, it's like, unfortunately, any political system is going to have the assumptions. And even the scientific method, like, some people think that the scientific method is this perfect and just and completely biasless system for doing things. But, like, if you ever, like, go into a science department and you start to understand how science works from the inside, you'll know that, like, even with peer review, like, the sciences are still places of politics and weird things going on. So, like, I don't think there's ever going to be a role for, like, a perfectly scientific idea of how to run humanity, because the developing the ideas of how to run humanity are not really something that you can test with a clipboard and like a graph. You can't be like, look, this bar graph says everything's fine, because very often you do that and like, no, it's not. Do you think all leftist republics should have nuclear weapons? It seems the most effective strategy to prevent U.S. military attacks. Yeah, to an extent. I'd rather no one have nuclear weapons, but mutually assured destruction is one of the ways to keep leftist regimes alive. I mean, it's the reason why North Korea is somehow still around. That country would have been gone a million years ago if it wasn't for nuclear weapons, or China's nuclear weapons, or their own now. Will you free our alien comrades in the Area 51 raid? Yes. I mean, I think they already got out. We already talked about Cory Booker. Sorry. Should not call Cory Booker an alien. He is a perfectly human, Earth-based life form. Ted Cruz, on the other hand, I don't think he's from around here. He's just uncanny enough that he seems more like a human pretending to be a person than a person. Like, there was an interview with Heidi Cruz, Ted Cruz's totally not purchased wife. And apparently, very soon after they got married and moved in together, Ted Cruz went to the grocery store and bought 100 cans of soup. This is what Ted Cruz thought food was. So he was just like... So Heidi was just like, all right, go get some groceries. And then he was just like, what do humans eat? Humans eat soup. I will buy 100 cans of soup. Oh, boy. We're all over the place today. Ted just having a normal one. Yup. Like, just think about the thought process of being Ted Cruz going to the grocery store and thinking, this is what Heidi wanted me to do. Buy 100 cans of Campbell's soup. And then he also talked... he did one interview where he described queso. And the way he described queso was so disgusting that something as delicious as queso I got turned off of for a while. Which is impressive. Is Ted an alien? I think it's pretty obvious that Ted's an alien. Queso. Queso. Like the kind of spicy cheese that you dip nachos in. Is queso not like a big thing?
It is.
Okay. Okay. Actually, now I'm curious. Do you think that the ruling class will resort to using nuclear weapons against their own population in the event they make significant strides for change? I think that if they felt like they were out of all other options, yes. I think that there hasn't been... So in military strategy circles, they talk about something called the nuclear taboo. And basically, when you get to a desperate point in a conflict, the decision is the calculus about, are you willing to break the nuclear taboo to like win the war? And oftentimes, in all the wars that have happened since, the advent, since World War II, basically, anytime that has come up, they have decided it's not. So that means that If queso came up as a question in the next debate, Kelly, then Cory Booker would have to say no because Cory Booker is vegan. Um, yeah. So in that mind, so anyways, to continue on the nuclear thing. So if there was like a leftist uprising and it was either like break the nuclear agreement or break the nuclear taboo or lose your position of power, I think they might actually do it. Because they've never been that against, a nuclear power hasn't been that against the ropes since World War II. Why are so many young leftists idealizing philosopher Slavoj Žižek? Mostly because he's funny. I find that like a lot of young men on the internet seem very like if you can wrap up political ideas in funny jokes, they're much more receptive to it. I think it's why South Park conservatives exist. I think that I actually think that South Park conservatives are kind of the fertilizer for the alt-right. I think it's why Slavoj Žižek has fans. I imagine that it's why like 4chan created so many Nazis. It's like I think that the politics. I think that if you can, and also like people like a Rubin or a whatever Shapino or the other one, the one that the Crowders, they wrap up their horrible politics in humor, and I think that for a certain contingent of young guys, that appeals to them because humor attached to a idea, whether it be compensating for, like humor attached to dealing with hard times or dealing with difficult ideas can make them a lot more palatable. So I think a lot of young leftists get into Slavoj Žižek because he's funny. What about George Carlin anarchists? Well, I did used to say that I used to really dislike. I thought George Carlin is funny, but like he's definitely a product of his time, and that like there was a period where everyone was like, or I was thinking of making a new logical fallacy called argumentum ad George Carlin, which is like if you can cite a George Carlin quote about it, somehow that makes it a better argument, which I thought was weird. I know it's gauche to compare Trump to Hitler, but how similar is Trump to Hitler? Like the camps and the following are two big similarities, but what else is there? I don't think. I think that there is more to compare with Trump and Mussolini than Trump and Hitler. I think that Hitler had a worldview. Hitler had a systematic idea. He had a conspiratorial belief that the Jews were behind all of the ills of the world. He had thought a lot about it. Mussolini was a big dum-dum who just liked being a bully and liked grabbing power. And he got mad whenever people didn't do his power. And so in my mind, I think that Trump feels a lot more like a Mussolini character to me than like a Hitler. And I mean, to even the extent that like there are some videos of Mussolini making like poses and faces where you're like, this is Trump. This is just Trump. He's doing the exact same thing. And yeah, like Mussolini was literally like make Italy great again and stuff like that too. So I see that as a stronger comparison, which makes me scared if Trump ever gets in talks with a fascist who has more of a cogent worldview. Because Mussolini became really dangerous because he became a powerful in scare quotes, ally of Nazi Germany. You should do a video reviewing a high school history textbook or something. That might be fun. I have a textbook in the house that is the university U.S. survey course textbook for a Canadian university, because the United States history is just like one course until you get into higher levels. So, but I also think it's the same textbook done. It's Eric Foner's Give Me Liberty, which for anybody who's in American history circles is like the definitive American history textbook. And I think it's also used in AP history in the United States, AP American history. And it is the textbook at the core base of, what's it called?
Want more water?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is the textbook at the core base of the series, the YouTube series Crash Course U.S. History. And I've been thinking about looking through it. I'd be interested to see what, like, I haven't picked it to like the tiny little things, and I haven't read it in several years. I haven't taught American history in a long time, except for like YouTube videos. That could be fun though. I feel like it'd be a good stream, but maybe not a good video. Okay. Do you think it's accurate to claim the United States Republican Party changed under Trump? Bush, Reagan, and Nixon were really trash as well. I would say there's a couple things you could say to that. The thing is, I think that Trump maybe was closer to Ronald Reagan out of all those presidents. Because the thing is, like, the reason why Trump was able to do the things he did, thank you, is because Trump was self-financing his campaign, which meant that he didn't have wealthy benefactors that that he was beholden to. So that meant that he could just say the blatantly racist things, but also, like, for example, one of the big political issues that people thought the 2020 thing was going to go through was debt and getting the budget under control. You remember when that was an issue? I think there was just an article that came out today about how the Tea Party movement basically died yesterday because of the agreement made to raise the debt ceiling for several years. And, but like, that was a big issue that a lot of wealthy benefactors wanted pushed, like the Koch brothers. And, you know, they astroturfed the whole Tea Party movement about it. And a lot of Republicans were on board for it. Also, the marching orders for the Republicans in the 2016 election were to soften their stance on illegal immigration, which Trump, like, completely ignored. And so Trump was able to be radically different from the Republican Party because he wasn't beholden to the Republican donors and therefore Republican orthodoxy. And that's why he won. Something that maybe the Democratic Party should think about when it comes to Bernie Sanders. But Reagan was kind of like that too. Because Nixon was he was still a conservative, but he was a relatively liberal Republican for the Republican Party at the time. Or at least compared to today. And when Ronald Reagan came into office, he came in with a entirely new cohort of all of the neoconservatives and all of the neoliberals. Because people like in Reagan's cabinet were involved with Republican White Houses all the way until the end of the second George Bush administration. Is Trump is also coming from the outside, but he's not coming with like a body of people who have established like ideas. He's coming in because on a wave of popular support, because he's a big boy, big strong man, make make the sad people feel strong because they can call people cucks on the internet. So Trump comes in with like no one. He can't even fill like 3/4 of his positions. And so I would say that, yeah, the Republican Party has changed a lot because now the party establishment isn't even in control of the White House. It's sort of its own thing. And then the Republican Party is like stuck in Congress trying to like navigate his eccentricities. Which, you know, that's a thing. I'm not sure if that was, I don't think that was the case under Reagan or Bush, but I think that there is, I mean, I sincerely hope not. History's kind of going to bear this out, but I hope not. But I imagine there are people who are trying to think of a way that they can latch on to Donald Trump's, like, rhetoric and criticisms of capitalism, while still promoting Republican orthodoxy. I don't think that's ever going to work. I think that a lot of like what Donald Trump was able to do is because Donald Trump was independently wealthy. And I don't know if anyone's ever going to be able to do the same thing again in the Republican Party. Reagan had handlers. He was famously kind of stupid. He was famously real stupid. Once a year, the president was updated on the status of the American nuclear arsenal. So he would have the military nuclear weapons experts come in and talk about the arsenal they had and what status they were and everything like that. And apparently for Ronald Reagan, they needed to draw them. Like they needed to make the different sizes in like a chart. And Ronald Reagan's comments were always like, why do we have so many of the little ones? We should get more big ones. So like that was like the status of like the Reagan intellectual powerhouse. Not to mention he got conned into funding Star Wars. Yeah. I may have implied on Twitter the other day that I wanted to take food away from poor people. That was poorly worded, not my intention. Considers my formal apology. Well, you are forgiven. Leonardo. Has Plato's theory of forms come true via social media with how Instagram and Facebook popularize perfect lives and body images, hence viewers view them as perfect forms? Oh. Leonardo, I thought we've talked about this. I'm not very good at the philosophies. I vaguely know about Plato's theory of forms. It has to do with like the cave, right? This is the cave. And about how all things have like the idealized form of them. Like all trees are just imperfect forms of the perfect tree that exist in a metaphysical... I don't know. That's the answer. I don't know how to philosophy. I'm sorry. You should ask Ollie that question. Real important question. Cool Ranch or Nacho Doritos, and which one should I put in my mac and cheese, aka craft dinner for you Canadians? I would definitely go with Cool Ranch. Nacho Doritos I feel like would not contribute much to a craft dinner experience, and Cool Ranch would give it a new flavor. And I generally prefer Cool Ranch Doritos more than Nacho. And also, I don't really eat Doritos, so I can't really answer this too great either. I'm not really that into Doritos, to be honest. Or really any corn chips. I'm much more into like, I don't know if you guys have these, like they're called Mrs. Vanelli's or whatever. They're like kettle chips or whatever. Miss Vicky's, that's it. Miss Vicky's chips. I like those a lot. There's a chili and sour cream one that I think is really, really good. I don't know if you have it in America. I don't think you do.
I think they exist in America.
I'll find out in a second. Suppose a virus resulted in Western society collapsing. Do you think the survivors could create a communist society from scratch, or would they be too attached to capitalism? I think that in the wake of like a disaster like that, you could totally do it. I think that a reset like that would probably be a decent impetus to put in something like that. Grandmaster Crusader, are you a Democrat or Republican? I don't know if that's okay. The answer to that is I am neither, because I am not an American citizen. I guess, if you go by like actual party membership, I am a New Democrat, which is the Social Democratic Party in Canada. But at heart, I am a rampaging anarcho-pacifist. Do you think the Gulag is as bad as the right-wing claims? A Siberian penal colony doesn't seem too different from an Australian penal colony of the British Empire. I don't know for sure. I'm going to do some research on that in the near-term future for a video that I want to do later this year. So I'll give you more updates on that when it actually happens. What if Jeb Bush won the 2016 election? I mean, things would be very... with Newt Gingrich as vice president, we would be on the moon, and we would have a 51st state on the moon by now. And then on top of that, somebody said go sing for the NDP. Well, Professor Frank, I voted for Nikki Ashton. Sorry. But yeah, if Jeb Bush won the 2016 election, two things would happen. The moon would become America's 51st state. And on top of that, Area 51, all of the aliens kept in Area 51, they would be freed. Also, free V-Bucks. There would be a UBI, but it's just for V-Bucks. People who voted leave deserve to suffer. I thought you didn't believe in retributive justice. Oh, gosh. This is always hell. There's a difference between what I think should happen and the things that I say for shitposting purposes. It obviously sucks that the British are going to go through terrible times because of Brexit. Is my sympathy for leavers a little diminished by the fact that they voted for this because they're racists? A little bit. What if 1968 revolution won? I'm trying to remember which one that is. It's a Europe thing, right? I don't remember. Okay, France. Oh, France. Yeah, they had like a left-wing student revolution in 1968. I don't know what would happen if that had gone through. I am not good at French history. Or if it's like the fact that in 1968 there seemed like to be like a student revolution going on everywhere. In which case, I don't know. I don't think it would... It was mainly led by like young people, like young baby boomers. And we all know what boomers ended up becoming like. So who knows? What sorts of positive alternate history settings would be the most interesting to you? I would have liked some interesting alternate history scenarios that I would love to see actually discussed, because I think that they would lead to some interesting thinking about how the world could function. One would be if I would love if the Allies in World War II. What would happen if the Allies in World War II were able to maintain the wartime alliance and were able to keep amicable relations between the Soviet Union and the rest of the world? think that'd be an interesting thing to see. I wonder how that would work. What would have happened if... I really want that alternate history scenario that came from the Amazon show that never seemed to surface, where it was called like Black America, where after the Civil War, former slaves were just given their own country in the South, and they had their own country that was by and for black people in the Southern United States. I think that would have been a cool alternate history scenario to see what it would be like. I never actually... I think that I imagine that show probably died for some reason, but I really wanted it to happen, because it's looking like that show's not going to happen, but that shitty version of it that HBO is putting out, Confederate, looks like it is going to happen. They say it's on hold while Benioff and Weiss do a Star War, but after the Star War is finished, I think they're going to go and make Confederate, which, given how well D.B. Weiss and Daniel Benioff handled the end of Game of Thrones, I am not happy about. I really hope that Confederate doesn't happen, because I think it's going to be done so poorly. But yeah, I would love to see what would be like if Black Americans were given their own state. What would be another interesting one to see? I think we already talked through one a long time ago. I like this one, where the CSA wins the Civil War and becomes like South Africa, but then the black people living in the Confederate States of America have like a Nelson Mandela type civil rights movement, and then the Confederacy is run by a black majority. Ooh. See, there's a CSA winning the Civil War story that nobody would see coming, and I think would be a lot more interesting than the ones that people normally show. Oh, if Abraham Lincoln survived the assassination, that'd be pretty nice. Or if Robbie Kennedy hadn't died in 1968, or if Martin Luther King hadn't died in 1968. All those things would be pretty interesting. Blacks were never a majority in the South, though. They were in parts of it, though. They were concentrated in this area called the Black Belt. They could definitely have set up something there. Do you think the Paris Commune would have lasted longer had they had a competent military leader? I don't think so. The Paris Commune was doomed from its beginning because it had the entirety of the had the entirety of like European powers invested in its downfall. Like, if the French weren't going to put it down, then the Prussians would have, or the British would have, or the Spanish would have. Someone would have done it. So I don't think that the Paris Commune was long for this world, unfortunately. Do you think that the United Federation of Planets are socialist? I remember having an argument about this in the pub one time. Yeah, I mean, it's a post-scarcity economy where they explicitly say they don't get paid. So in my mind, that's a socialist economy. Everybody would get pretty much anything they wanted, it sounds like. Is it accurate that paganism never truly died in Europe but continues through popular customs? Oh, fuck yeah, that's true. Look at all of the, look at, like, Christmas time and Easter time. Like, in Halloween and... Yeah, there's so many, like pagan traditions that live on in the Christian holidays. There's a lot of, like, of sort of, like, pagan Christian syncretism in a lot of the ways that Europeans talk about things and do things. Sorry, I'm drinking a lot of water because my throat's getting sore. Because I have been talking for almost 2 hours. As you can imagine, it does a number on the throat. That's why I'm trying to pace myself and stop yelling, and I don't know why I'm yelling. Reset the volume. We're going to relax, get closer to the microphone, be a little bit more of an intimate session, as I am a little quieter, a little more demure, a little less manic, a little more lovey. Because I don't want to destroy my throat, because now I need it to live. Okay, welcome to NPR with Tristan. Is it okay? Suppose the UK ends up with a far-left government because of the backlash to hard Brexit. Will that make it worth it? I'd be interested. I'd be interested to see if, a far-left government, who knows? I mean, I guess that would be worth it. I wonder what Jeremy Corbyn would do if he was just given the country right now. Okay. Lynn Perrin asks, when was the last time you went swimming? The last time I went swimming was this spring. I went to Mexico on a trip. There was a beach. There was ocean. There was a pool. I definitely swam then. How would you feel about Marianne not being the president, but having another position in the government where she can bring some fresh ideas? I don't know if she needs to be in government. I think that's not her. That's not her calling. I hope she gets a podcast. I feel like she'd make a very good podcaster. She's a media figure. She's an ideas person. But, like, getting shit done doesn't... I don't know how she would do in that kind of situation. But we need a liberal answer to Dave Rubin or Ben Shapiro or whatever. So, I would take a Marianne Williamson show. What do you think of the idea of nuclear weapons bringing overall peace? I've heard the phrase Pax Armorium Nuclei. There is some truth to it. I do think that there are, the reason we haven't had multiple world wars have to do with the fact that we really can't do that without killing each other now. And so I do think that it's going to be one of those, like, all or nothing things. I think that it'd be better if we could get rid of all nuclear weapons. Because even though, they might not have caused a world war, they do dangle over our heads like the sword of Damocles. And any one of them going off could spell the end of humanity because of the chain reaction with other nuclear weapons. And also they need to be maintained. My main worry about nuclear weapons is that there are so many of them and they're so destructive that we could cause serious damage with just one misfiring. Like, there doesn't even need to be a tense international situation. There could just be a glitch. There was a case where some nuclear weapons had their retro rockets fire in the silo because somebody plugged in some what's it called? They put in some punch cards incorrectly, which makes me more scared of, like, the idea that nuclear weapons a nuclear weapon could go off by accident and cause the end of the world. Or a missile could fire by accident, and by the time they realize it's an issue, the other countries have already done their second strike. So there's that. What do you think with the obsession that the Democrat... By the way, am I too quiet being this quiet? Just I want to know, because I can't hear people. I'm looking at a mic. I'm looking at a camera right now. I don't know how loud to be. So, okay. Let me just... Sorry, this is going to be a little loud. There we go. Get a little closer. Okay. What do you think with the obsession that Democrats have with veterans, glorifying military to survive in a colonist war machine to justify welfare for vets? I mean, I think it's a relatively smart power play in the United States. In America, there's this expectation to be very automatically respectful of military veterans, like with the troops, like with cops, that kind of thing. And so, like, no Democrat is going to win on fuck the troops. And there is definitely something to say about the fact that the United States tricks poor people into joining the military, destroys their minds, destroys their bodies, and then leaves them with nothing, like shitty medical services, shitty psychological services, and they become these husks of people in real bad situations. And to that extent, I do think that, you know, I don't know if it's glorifying the colonial war machine to say that those are people that need help. But, you know, yeah, just like respect the troops thing is definitely not something I like. But why does a nurse deserve less welfare than a soldier? They don't. They don't. Just that, you know, war has created a lot of veterans who have a lot of really nasty disabilities because they've been put at the front lines of some of the most horrible things that people can be involved with war. And then there's not that much to help them afterwards. Most people don't sign up because they want to be part of the colonialist war machine. They sign up because they want a stable job that gets them a college degree. And, they're not super great educated because it's America. And I just hope that if the Democrats go on the angle of, like, support our troops, send them home, that'd be a good angle, but I don't know if that's a thing. But yeah, I do think that there is something to be said about, like, we shouldn't just say, like, screw those people who have lost limbs and have post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, I don't know. I had a joke, but then I was like, oh no, people would not appreciate that one. Okay. What's next? I like this. I feel like I'm Bob Ross right now. You know, there's no bad questions, just happy accidents. We're just gonna go paint a tree. There's like this little bush. Don't worry. That bush is gonna be our secret. If you tell anyone about that bush, I'll kill you. No. Um, okay. So what's the next question we got? What do you think about bourgeois family arranged marriage and the concept of marriage? People have been talking about the end of marriage since the 1960s. I think that the 1960s thing was a discussion of was like the high divorce rate, because divorce rates were really high amongst boomers because they got married young, because their parents did, but because of because divorce laws got liberalized, it looked like there was a big spike in divorces happening because people were getting out of shitty marriages. But then divorce rates went down quite a bit after that, and millennials get married at a later age and less often than their parents do, but when they do, it's more stable. I don't know if I would consider family, the concept of family, bourgeois. I don't know. I think arranged marriage is not good. I don't think arranged marriage is a good thing. The concept of marriage is not terrible. It's an expression of people's faith in each other. It's very useful in the legal ways and the, immigration ways. But, that's a benefit, not the benefit. I don't know. I don't like micromanaging other people's lives so much, I don't like telling people what they can and can't do and what's right and what's wrong, and that if they're not hurting no one, I was reading an 18th century document, and it seemed from it that it was the usage of man was gender neutral. Do you think the idea of binary gender and gender roles are Victorian? They're not. They've been around for a while. Yeah, I'm not too well versed on this at the moment. But I do think that is a thing that I will probably talk about. I just had a conversation with Cypher, the cynical historian, and there's going to be a video done by the two of us in the not too distant future about sexual orientation and gender identity. So I'm sure I'll have something more to say about that as I do that research. Okay. Are there any other nationalist movements in other countries? There are nationalist movements in every country. Yeah. There's nationalism is almost in every country. What do you think the biggest differences are between Canadians and Americans? In what way are Americans and Canadians the most similar? I think... So Canadians and Americans share a lot of cultural touchstones. We've watched a lot of the same media. We speak similarly. Our accents are similar. So I feel like we understand each other a lot in that sense. There's a lot of intuitive understanding. But when you go past that kind of stuff, there is a profoundly different thing between about Americans and Canadians. I actually outlined these in a video for Mr. Beat that I don't think is coming out, or it is coming out, but I don't think it's out yet, is what I mean. But Canadians and Americans there's a couple things. I think that in Canada, the political loyalty and political tribalism is not as strong, which means that like for example, in Canada, it would be considered rude to ask somebody whether they were a liberal, a conservative, or a New Democrat. It's just like, that's private. That is a thing that, like, that's between me and my ballot. I think there's some problems with that, but that's part of the culture. The same goes with religion. One of the first questions that someone might ask another person in the United States, at least in certain parts of the United States, is what church you go to. Americans are much less afraid or much less shy about showing off their religious faith and expressing it verbally and openly, while in Canada, it would be considered, again, rude to ask somebody what their religion was. It's that kind of thing. And trying to think of some other examples. There's definitely like people get married younger in America. Kelly and I are not that far apart in age, yet all of Kelly's friends are married, and none of mine are. I'm trying to think what some other things might be. There's the language thing. French is part of our culture. We both have a second language. It's just different. In America, Spanish is your second language. And in Canada, French is our second language. It's official in Canada. It's not official in America. But, it is what it is. There's the impact of French people on our culture, just like as there's the impact of Spanish-speaking people on American culture. What else would there be? Americans, Canadians are definitely drilled to be more polite, to be more apologetic, to be more meek. I've apologized to a table before. Are churches in Canada as exploitative as the ones in the U.S.? Do they pay taxes or influence politicians? No, there's not really like churches are not really encouraged to get involved in political processes, and things like mega churches aren't really a thing. Except for the Catholic school boards. But that was put in place for us to segregate the French and the Irish, more than it was to support religion in schools. And now they're just here. And now they can take anyone. You can be not Catholic and go to Catholic school. It's weird. Canada is weird in that sense. Yeah. Also, race, even though Canada is a racist country and a white supremacist country, the race as someone's primary social category is less of a thing in Canada. In America, like, the first thing you would describe somebody as is what race they were, which I always find a little off-putting. I don't know. Those are the differences that come immediately to mind. Let's move on. We have lots of questions and 50 minutes left until the end of the stream. And, yeah. Isn't the Asian community bigger than the black community in Canada? Yeah, that is true. The immigration patterns in Canada and the U.S. are different. So that Canada has a lot more people who've immigrated from China, people who've immigrated from India, people who've immigrated from the Middle East, while America has a lot more people who've immigrated from Latin America and from other places. But on top of that, there's a lot more black people, and a lot of the black people in Canada are people who've are either people who are like related to African Americans the same way, but more often they are immigrants from the Caribbean. Um, yeah. All right. Do you think fascism is more of a reaction to communism than the result of capitalism? As in, the more left wing the left becomes, the more right wing the right becomes. Um, to an extent, um, I do think that there is a common thing that pushes people to become fascists and socialists, which is essentially the breakdown of the capitalist world order. You find less of radicalism when things are fine for people. The last time we saw fascism and socialism on the rise, like it is now, was during the Great Depression. I think fascism in the 1930s was definitely a reaction to communism. But fascism's rise today in places like, you know, Brazil and the United States and such was not so much a response to socialism or the rise of socialist movements, but it was a reaction to whatever. It was in many ways it does show that like fascism was a reaction to the breakdown of capitalism. So I think that's more true. I just think that in the 30s they sold themselves more as the anti-communist thing to get liberals on their side. Alrighty. I'm just gonna go to the washroom for a minute. So I'll be back in just a. Ooh, the lighting's really good right now. I'll be back in just a couple minutes. All right, everyone, welcome back. Hey, don't I look good? What's it called? Callie and I had set up this 3-point lighting dealie, and it kind of looked a little washed out. But then the sun went down, and now it looks a lot better. So once we get that third blackout curtain, I think this is going to be a really good setup. All right. Oh man, okay. Let's minimize. I have to stop looking at myself and start answering more of your cues. All right. Do you have a video about the history of Roe v. Wade? Also, if they pull off some black magic and get rid of it, what might they go after next? All right. So, do I have a video on the history of Roe v. Wade? Not explicitly, but I do talk about abortion and birth control in 2 different videos. And I think they're touched on, but they're not the subject of the video. So the first one I would point you to is a video I made on beer and gender, called, I think, like Witches, Beer, and Gender or something like that. And the second video I made that kind of is on it is a video on the history of birth control. Both of those kind of talk about the history of abortion and that kind of stuff. If America gets rid of Roe v. Wade, which I think is, I think it was flimsy, because Roe v. Wade is a very weak way to protect abortion rights. I think that universal health care is a much easier way to do it. But I don't know what they'll go after next. I imagine they'll probably go after what the hell was that one called? Windsor v. whatever, the Supreme Court decision that legalizes gay marriage. That's definitely one that they could go after. But Roe v. Wade is under threat right now because of a conservative court. But on top of that, Roe v. Wade should be replaced with universal health care, and that would change it a lot, because Planned Parenthood has done some great things, but America should not be relying on a non-profit private organization for essential healthcare services. Like, that's not a bad thing to say, right, Kelly?
No.
Okay. One second. I'm just gonna mute my mic so I can adjust in my chair without blowing up your ears. Okay. What is the point of metaphysics? Honestly, Logan, I don't know myself. I am not a big metaphysics person, and I don't know much about philosophy. And even when I did study philosophy a little bit, I did not like metaphysics. I don't understand it. I have a friend who is a philosophy professor of metaphysics, and I still don't understand it. Is someone telling me to be louder? Am I too quiet? Trying to preserve my vocal cords here. Okay. What are some of the most important Wikipedia pages you would make everyone read if you could? I think the anarchism one is a pretty good one. I would get everyone to read Anarchism. It's a pretty decent, it's a pretty decent political. It's one of those, anarchism's one of those things I think has the biggest gap between what it is and what people think it is. So I would put it on there. Okay. Virginia Hill. Ooh. Hello. I like this one. I might need to research this lady. Virginia Hill, an American organized crime figure? Okay. Okay. I am going to read that Wikipedia page later. Need more badass women in history for that series. And unfortunately, Anita Sarkeesian wrote History versus Women and covered a lot of really good ones, so I gotta find some new ones. Or just make videos out of the chapters of History versus Women, which I totally could do, I guess. But then again, she already did that in her own series, so. Oh, Emma Goldman, my favorite historical figure. I would definitely say read her Wikipedia page. I wrote an essay on Emma Goldman when I was in my master's. I love Emma Goldman so much. Okay. Where am I? Curious on what your opinion is of the U.S. covert interventions in the Soviet-Afghan war. I mean, it's not super covert. Like, the fact that Russian MiGs were getting shot down by military-trained Taliban agents with shoulder-mounted Stinger missiles is very conspicuous. I did a video about it. It's in my History of Al-Qaeda series. But the United States totally trained Mujahideen soldiers in Pakistan, specifically on military tactics and like kind of commando tactics. But on top of that, they also trained and supplied them with Stinger missiles for taking down Soviet air superiority. Who is your favorite Dragon Ball Z character? I watched that show a lot when I was a kid, like a lot. Waiting for all the Z stuff to come in. Cause yeah, it's Dragon Ball Z, but I wanted to mess with people. I found myself liking Vegeta for some reason. He was like this grouchy person, but you know, Vegeta was kind of cool. Little guy who was grumpy was great. Yeah. But I also kind of, I didn't really watch too far past the Frieza saga, so I don't really know much about what happens later. I don't know much about like Goten or Trunks or whatever. Or any of the other things. Okay. Did you hear about the coalition between the comedian president of Ukraine and a singer? I have heard that the president of Ukraine is a stand-up comic, but I didn't know too much about him. So basically, you didn't watch Dragon Ball Z. I watched until the end of the Frieza saga. I think I remembered watching after that. There was like a short-run Garlic Jr. thing where it was like a vampire or something. I remember watching that. And then I think sometime when they were dealing with like androids and Cell and stuff like that was when I stopped watching. Okay. So where are we? What if the Restoration England, King Charles establishes peerage in the colonies? I wouldn't even know how to start. Are Nazi and Confederate flags okay to buy with the purpose of burning them? That is like the one situation in which I think it's okay to buy a Nazi or Confederate flag. If you explicitly are planning to burn them, that is good. Is making jokes with the British public suffering because of Brexit punching up or punching down? Okay. One track mind going on right now. I think it's punching up because I'm broke as shit, and most people are not as broke as me. Are you sad that the universe will die eventually, or should I not worry about that because it's 10 to the power of 100 years away? Yeah, trust me, getting to the end of the century is going to be a uphill battle for us, let alone like worrying about the heat death of the universe. I think it'll be okay. It depends if you believe in things like, I don't know, if you believe in things like the multiverse theory. There's new universes being made all the time, so there's that. All right, someone wants to come up. One sec. Hey, it's everyone's favorite part of the show. Make sure that you guys can see her. Oh yeah, you guys are good. Now there's going to be a bunch of chat that's just cat. Hello, Phoebe. How's my girl? Okay. That's not actually what multiverse theory says. Alright, I don't know. There's like the whole quantum foam thing. A couple hours ago, a guy came to my house and threatened my family because our dog had been keeping his children awake. How would neighbor disputes like that resolve in an ANCOM world? Probably go to, like, what's it called? You could just get somebody to come and help you mediate such a thing. That's like a disagreement. You don't need to get the police involved in that. Like, did you guys call the police on that, or did you just work out your differences? Okay. Someone said, I bet all cats are communists. All cats are libertarians. They are fundamentally, they enslave humans and they care only about themselves. But they're cute, so we love them. Where were we? Oh. What do you think about the role of heroism in the revolution? I hate cult of personality, but I do think that encouraging heroism and limited glorifying of people does increase morale of the revolutionaries. Sure, I guess. Maybe not. I think that we're always, like, that's like the thing we're going to do. It's just that using it for political purposes is just more of an issue. Cats are the official anarchist mascot. Oh, I like that one a lot more. Hey? This is the quietest cat I've ever owned, by the way. She's like very quiet. She only meows very, very rarely. And usually it has to do with food. And it's quiet. So she's like the quietest cat ever. Tristan, your mic's dying. Oh, it's my connection. Okay. We're good. I'm so paranoid about the audio. Why did Americans become shittier people in the 80s? There's a book on that. I haven't read it, but it's called Backlash. And basically that periods of social progress like the 60s and 70s were met with a social backlash against those progresses, and that's kind of why the 80s was a more conservative time. And it was a lot like now, because you ended up with a younger generation that was more conservative than their parents, which, you know, you get with like those Zoomers. Can a non-violent situation like a highly stressful exam cause PTSD? That is a good question to ask a psychopathologist and not a Tristan. Maybe Kelly, my wife's a psychologist, but not like that kind of psychologist, but she might know.
I don't.
She doesn't know. Should hit up my friend Caroline, who actually is a psychiatrist, but she's not here right now, and I haven't talked to her in over 2 years. Which bread tuber would you unironically vote for if they ran for political office? I'd vote for Thought Slime. I'd vote for... The most likely, I think, is going to be ContraPoints. She's gonna run for office at some point, and I won't be able to vote for her because I'm Canadian. But Ollie would make a pretty good politician. He's very pretty. He's a very pretty man. Looks very good. He has the politician look. I'd rather we had somebody with more leftist ideas in office than what we have now, for the most part. What is your position when it comes to the problems in Northern Ireland? I can't say that I'm super well versed on Irish history. From what I know, the people in Northern Ireland, by and large, want to stay in the UK. I don't know if the whole issue with Brexit and trying to draw the borders with Ireland has changed that somewhat. But when it comes to like things like Northern Ireland, like Scotland, like Catalonia and all of them, my desire goes along with I want the people who live there to chase their bliss and do what they want. Have you read sci-fi author Charlie Strauss's blog posts on Brexit and the UK's chance of breaking up, where he talks about some potential dark scenarios? If so, thoughts? I have not read those. Sorry. Where do you think the idea of modesty comes from? Why do some cultures think wearing a skirt below the knee is modest, while other cultures think that it's not modest enough? That's a good question. It's old, and it's not explicit. I think that what it might be linked to is there's a couple factors that I think could play into it, which is one, when you want to impose a religion or a spiritual set of beliefs on somebody, one of the things that you can do is integrate religious practices into everyday life, create quote unquote the rituals. And this is why, if you notice, one of the things that religions do is they tend to take over the major milestones and celebrations of someone's life. Hence why weddings, funerals, things like that are tend to have religious aspects to them. So by taking part of somebody's natural life and like sexuality and putting controls on it is a way to integrate religious life into your everyday life. On top of that, there is a sense of misogyny and the ownership of women that comes from a historical practice where before DNA tests and stuff like that, where inheritance and stuff like that is tied to property and wealth and things like that. So it comes from like kind of older ideas about who gets what. And so you mix those fashions together and the long time oppression of women, that you end up with ideas like modesty. How will universal health care be the issue? The issue is not how expensive abortion is. It's about abortion not being illegal. The reason is because even with abortion being legal in America, abortion is under threat. It's under threat in Canada too because of this. Even if it was legal, like Roe v. Wade might protect the right to get an abortion, but if your state only has one Planned Parenthood in the whole goddamn state that'll take you like 2 days to drive to, you're not going to be able to get that abortion. And so having access to abortion is really the only way to do it in a way that is safe and, an actual protection of abortion rights. So that's the main thing that I would say. And that's like that's one of the things that I would say that would keep abortion as a thing that people have access to. And I think that if it was something that was safe and accessible, it would be a harder thing to take away. That's basically it. Why do some say that American... Oh, can't say that word in Canada. Why do some say that Indigenous Americans receive the most amount of handouts, but they still live in adversity? Could it be that tribal leaders take all the money? How is it in Canada? In America, they are very much not given that many things, especially because Indigenous people in the United States are shoved onto these reservations that are extremely remote with very little resources, and yeah, it's a rough situation. Now, because they don't have to pay like sales tax, and they at least they get free university in Canada. That doesn't really mean much when you can't drink the water, which is an issue in Canada. In Canada, we have Indigenous reserves that are extremely bad. Canada is sort of an international pariah for the way that we treat our Indigenous people. We have communities that have been on boil water advisories for years, and the Indigenous people of the country are relegated to some of the most remote areas of the land, so bad that there are communities that only have roads in the wintertime when rivers freeze over, or communities in the Arctic where the only way in and out is to fly, where a cucumber might end up being $30 because everything has to be flown in. That is the kind of issue that comes up in these communities. And I don't know if like some exemptions from taxes and stuff like that really is going to solve the problem. Are the Zoomers really more conservative? Let's think about that. I think that there is an aspect to that. So, let me just go on, Phoebes. So, what I would say to that is that Zoomers are a generation that grew up in much more kind of different context than like millennials a little bit. There's a lot of similarities, but Zoomers grew up in a context where the kind of helicopter parenting combined with the widespread use of online communities, which like millennials, like the internet was becoming a thing more recently. So Zoomers have been completely raised and born in online communities, and some studies of these young people have shown that they have much higher rates of social anxiety, much higher rates of social isolation, and things like that, which we've done other studies. Zoomers are born after when? Usually after 2000. So 2000 to whenever. So Zoomers, because of the disconnection, now this is all generalities. This is, of course, extremely vague. And these are things that I would not attribute to any individual Zoomer unless I, knew them personally. But because of the lack of social interaction, like the amount of face-to-face social interaction time that Zoomers have compared to previous generations is astonishingly low. And the amount of social anxiety is extremely high. And they grew up during the Great Recession. So their concept of like the future, like millennials grew up with an optimistic idea of what the future would be like that was taken away, while Zoomers grew up with no such promises. So that's why millennials tend to be very nostalgic, while Zoomers tend to be very nihilistic. But also, the lack of face-to-face social communication has been shown in various studies on how people interact in communications online to have lower empathy and less just like lower empathy and lower sociability. And so that does result in people having less of a, general kindness to other people. And that has led to radicalization on the right, because I don't know why. Talking about radicalization on the left, I don't know how that pans out. I mean, there's a bunch of you guys in here, but I don't know. I'm genuinely a little on the fence about that, because I don't know. That might just be the fact that the crisis of capitalism is pushing them in different directions, but I do think that the rise of the alt-right has a lot to do with the changing ways that we interact with other people, and the general bleak outlook we have for our economic futures. So what I'm finding is that Zoomers, while they're not more conservative in like the traditional sense, like they're not more Christian, they're not more, they're not even more like fiscally conservative or anything like that. What they are more is fascist, like wanting authoritarian governments and wanting to destroy their opposition, for lack of a better word. And there's a lot more like racism and like master race type things. So you'll have a lot of these people who are like very very cool on LGBTQ issues, and then also fascists, which is like the weirdest thing. How would a Bernie Sanders presidency influence Canadian politics? I actually think that's pretty. I think that that's already shown itself a little bit. Bernie Sanders running for president in 2016. Like, we already had people like Nikki Ashton, who ran for leader of the NDP. She actually took a leave of absence to campaign for Bernie. And there's a lot of talk in the NDP of having more of a return to saying socialism. In 2003, the NDP decided to go from being a Democratic Socialist Party to a Social Democrat Party. And already with Bernie Sanders fever and Jeremy Corbyn fever going on in the UK, there is talk in the NDP of going back to a Democratic Socialist agenda and being less afraid of the good ideas that we have. The only problem is the NDP still have this very bad electoral strategy. But in my mind, for the most part, Bernie Sanders' impact on or on Canadian politics would be a real shot in the arm for democratic socialists in Canada. Aren't social democracy and democratic socialism the same thing? Actually, they are not. A democratic socialist still believes in the ending of capitalism. They just believe in doing it through electoral politics and activism rather than revolution. While a social democrat might support a few of the major platforms of a socialist group, like a social democrat might support public health care, strong unions, things like that, but they're typically reformist to the point where they do not want to see the end of capitalism per se. That's like I think that's the big difference between the two. I have I just wrote about this for the Cold War, so it's fresh in my mind. Yeah. Okay. Do you think Canada should become a republic? I wouldn't be against it. Would you do a video on the history of the left in the same way Innuendo Studios did a history of conservatism? Maybe. I mean, like, you could definitely do that. I think that could be a good idea. Would you do it? Yes. Am I going to do it? Who knows? I have like a vague idea to do something kind of like that for the ideology series if it comes up sometime. What do you think about mottos like liberty, equality, fraternity, and what do you think the communist version is? It's bread and roses. That's the communist version of liberty, equality, fraternity. Bread and roses, or bread and peace. That was the one that the Bolsheviks used before the revolution. Was the slogan "bread and peace," and I feel like we should bring that one back. So is it that if they move into a metro area, they lose all the help? They don't lose all the help. If you are an Indigenous person, you have something called a band card, which, depending upon what tribe you belong to, you're able to cross the American border with that, because there's a lot of Indigenous people whose territory overlaps with the United States, and so they are, as members of that nation, able to go between their own territory. They also get some help. They do get free university, but it could mean issues for their children if it could have issues with their children, and some of the social benefits do go away if they do not live on reserves. How would a post-capitalist society deal with polluted oceans? In my mind, a post-capitalist society that has found a way to incentivize economic action based on social good rather than what's profitable would be in a position where, like, well, the ocean is polluted. We need to find a way to do it. We need to find a way to make stuff that doesn't do that. And then we would do it. And we wouldn't have to worry about all of the hurdles of trying to make it profitable or making incentives or a market-based solution or anything like that. So in my mind, it would be a lot easier. Is it true that the NDP helped Conservatives win because they split the left vote, hence Conservatives win a minority in the total vote? That is true to an extent. Depends on the riding. It's not really, like, at the national level, it's not really like a thing. Because, like, we're now in a liberal majority government anyway. But that is an issue. There are some ridings where the Liberals stop the NDP from winning. No one says that in those ridings that the Liberals are somehow spoiling the NDP vote. And on top of that, like, Europeans have solved this problem a long time ago. They're called coalition governments. Like in some European countries, there's tons of political parties, and then when an election is over, they then go into negotiation to find out what the coalition's going to be. I'd really prefer if Canada had that. And I don't know why an NDP Liberal coalition government would be a bad idea, or why people would not want to do that. I know that, like, basically Stephen Harper was successful in somehow making it a dirty word, but I think a coalition government would be perfectly good compromise for that, to solve that problem. Is there any difference between the definition of communism and socialism? I think somebody mentioned that socialism is sort of like a transitional form to communism, and that communism is never really a thing that's ever actually been achieved, that it is like the dictatorship of the proletariat where there's no state and everything's been taken care of, and that socialism is sort of the government that you use to transition from one phase to the other. But in practical politics, socialist and communist tends to mean, if you go into like a non-theoretical standpoint, like in like talk about like, you know, if you're going to talk about like French and Italian politics or something like that, socialist tends to mean democratic socialist, and communist tends to mean communist. So like the difference tends to mean whether or not you want a revolution or you want like you know, democracy, and you know, like a communist would call democracy bourgeois, while a, you know, democratic socialist would not. Oh my. Okay. How would there be universal health care in a stateless society? Would medical cooperatives provide services funded by donations, or what? I think that a stateless society would not have money. They would function based on the fact that they would need to function. You don't, you know, the whole like idea of the gift economy, that you do your medical stuff because that's what society needs, and you get the things that you want from society because you know, other people are doing things based on what they think are contributing to making the world work. As for ideas for how a medical system could work under an anarchist model, medical cooperatives definitely sound good. Definitely syndicalist unions of doctors and medical professionals could set up and manage hospitals. Like, you know, instead of having private hospitals or anything like that, you'd have the doctors and the nurses and the medical workers all part of a big union that would be in charge of running and managing the hospitals. But also, you know, you could have different solutions for different times, like, you know, different places. It depends upon where you're at. So, in my mind, like an anarchist society, like the one I would want, would be an extremely complex society. There'd probably be a lot of things that would require computers, sophisticated computer systems to like coordinate the movement of goods and services and stuff around. But it's well within our capacity to do at the moment. Just look at like the kind of like technology under the hood at Amazon, for example. It would be a complicated society with a lot of rules and agreements, but there would just not be rulers, if that makes sense. Do communists dream of socially just sheep? I know what this is a reference to. I'm just trying to think of a good joke to add on to it. I sometimes get messages from communists who are very reactionary and are very socially regressive, and that makes me worried. That's not really an answer. I imagine that was just a joke answer, or joke question. Why are Eastern Europeans perceived as creepy, while Western Europeans are thought as super liberal and into euphoria? Probably some Cold War era stereotypes going on there. All right, I'm going to do these last 4 questions, and I'm going to call it a night, just so you guys know. So I'm not going to be taking... Gad Uriv, your question on the Spartacus League is going to be the last question I do of the night. Why are... Oh, we did that one. Why did you steal Woody? Oh, boy. So I know that... Okay, so everyone says that I look like Al from Al's Toy Barn. I have heard this before. There was a time when a group of teenage libertarians thought that that association was really, really, really funny. And they harassed me on every single social media platform that I had with that line. So it's gotten me a little squirmy. But, yeah. I don't know what the... I haven't seen Toy Story 2 in like a million years. I think I only ever saw Toy Story 2 once. And I barely remember it. All right. Is Justin Trudeau popular in Canada? The internet makes it seem otherwise. He's definitely... I mean... He's definitely less popular than he was when he was elected. People had a real long honeymoon period with Justin Trudeau. But he's done a lot of stuff over the last 4 years that have made the Conservatives hate him because he's not destroying the environment enough to make them happy. And also he lets refugees in the country, which are brown people that, people in Alberta are just absolutely freaking out about. And for the left, there's a lot of people, myself included, that voted for the Liberals and Justin Trudeau because Justin Trudeau campaigned on a platform of ending first past the post elections, and so that he would move to something else. That was an initiative that he instantly went back on, and a lot of the progressive things that he said he was going to do, he ended up not doing. And he had this veneer that he was like, I'm this super feminist guy running for president or prime minister. I'm very I'm going to have a 50-50 women cabinet. I'm going to be super representation, hire more women guards. It's going to be great. But then he got his 50-50 cabinet. And then last year, 2 of them had to resign because Justin Trudeau basically tried to pressure the Attorney General to let a engineering corporation get away with crimes because it would hurt. They would lose jobs in Quebec and they would lose seats in Quebec, which was called the SNC Lavalin scandal. Very soon after he was elected prime minister, he agreed to an arms deal agreement with Saudi Arabia. So the feminist prime minister sold weapons to Saudi Arabia to do their war in Yemen. And basically it's just kind of come through that he's just not a progressive in any meaningful way. And that it was a very thin veneer to do the very typical, they thought he was going to be a new type of liberal, but really he was just a liberal after all. Which I know to the Americans sounds really counterintuitive because in America, liberal means anyone who's not a conservative. But in Canada, liberals are centrists. Okay. And last question the Spartacus League and the Social Democratic Party of Germany were led by Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. Are you telling me they didn't want to bring down capitalism? It could, they might have been democratic socialists. What I will say about these labels, these ideological labels, is that they are very fluid, and their definition and what they their name versus what they actually believe in is very murky and very mercurial. I guess is another way to say it. For example, the whole National Socialist thing, or how. There was contingent of the Socialist Party of Italy that were racist and reactionary and wanted war during World War I, which makes no sense. And it's socialism has gone through has socialism used to have a much more vague definition back in the times of Rosa Luxemburg than it has now. And I would say that before and after World War II, socialism has had a major redefinition that is important to mention about. Thank you, Leonardo, for coming out. All right. So that was all the questions. I see it's 10:01, so we're already a little over time. That's okay. I like you guys. So anyways, this has been a great stream. I feel a whole lot less burnt out because I decided to go Bob Ross. Might make that more of a thing in the future. Anyways, everyone, you've been amazing. And I hope that your week is amazing. And I hope to see you guys either next Monday or next Tuesday for another one of my streams. You guys have an enchanted evening.